Have you ever worked so hard to get everything you dreamed of, only to realize it could all be taken from you in a moment? Have you ever reached the top, only to feel completely alone? I thought that saving the family business and turning it into a high-end food company would finally earn me respect. I believed the company would be mine. But I was wrong. My family had other plans, and I didn't see it coming. They'll regret that choice. Crystal glasses clinked in the VIP room at the Hawthorne, one of the best restaurants in Providence. It was a party to celebrate my success. After 6 years of hard work, sleepless nights, and giving everything I had finally made it. Paul Provisions, the small local shop I had saved, had now grown into a national brand. I had just secured a $9 million investment from Wellington Partners, one of the top venture capital firms. This money would help us grow even more. The room filled with applause as Scott Miller, the lead investor, raised his glass. To Emma, the strong woman who proved that with hard work and focus, anything is possible. I smiled and raised my glass too. I should have felt proud, even joyful. But then my mother leaned in, her voice quiet so only I could hear her over the noise. "Emma," she said, "you've done very well. But when Kevin comes back next month, I think he would be a better choice for CEO. I froze. Kevin? My brother? The same brother who had been gone for a whole year, traveling around Europe after getting his MBA from Massachusetts Institute? He hadn't helped the business at all. I blinked, trying to keep my smile. I was in shock. "What are you saying, Mom?" I asked, trying to stay calm. She gave my hand a soft squeeze, like she was talking to a little kid. "You're capable, Emma. But Kevin is a man, and he has an MBA. He'll be stronger in business. His travels gave him a wider view than you." I almost laughed. A wider view? Really? I was the one who gave up everything, my time, my youth, to save Paul Provisions. When my parents didn't know what to do, and the company was close to shutting down, I stepped in. I gave up a high-paying job in finance, left the comfort and security of Bridgeport, and came back to Providence. I even mortgaged my apartment and took out loans just to keep the company alive during its worst days. And what did Kevin do? He jumped from one fancy restaurant to another, relaxed on luxury beaches, and posted pictures online with hashtags like business mindset. He got his MBA through an online program. His experience was just traveling the world and enjoying expensive food and places. I held my wine glass tighter. I could feel the anger building inside me. But when Scott Miller looked at me with concern, I forced myself to stay calm. I couldn't show how hurt and angry I was, not now. "Is everything okay, Emma?" Scott asked gently. I took a deep breath, raised my glass, and smiled. "Perfectly fine," I said, pretending everything was normal. But inside I was boiling. My parents had shown no respect for what I had done. They ignored all the sacrifices I made. Now they expected me to just hand everything over to Kevin? After all I built? No. I wouldn't let that happen. My brother wasn't going to walk in after doing nothing and take control of my work. 6 years ago, when I walked out of the tall glass building of Fadden and Company, my job in Bridgeport, I knew I was taking the biggest risk of my life. I still remember what my boss said as I left. "Emma, are you really giving up a great career to sell jam?" I didn't answer, because at the time I wasn't sure. I only knew one thing. If I didn't step in, Paul Provisions would fail. And I couldn't let that happen. The first days at Paul were tough. I walked into our main store in Norfolk around noon. There were no customers, no online orders, and a pile of unpaid bills on the desk. I looked at my parents. They looked tired and worn out. But what hurt the most was the look in their eyes. They had already given up. I hadn't. I got to work right away. During the day, I stood behind the counter and helped every single customer myself. I asked questions, listened, and tried to understand why they used to shop here, but had stopped. At night, I went through the numbers, looking for ways to save money and fix problems. In the first month, I made a hard choice. I shut down our second store. My dad was angry. "You can't do this, Emma. We put so much money into that store." "That's exactly why we're in debt," I told him. I slid the reports across the table. We're losing $220,000 a month. If we don't close it now, we'll lose everything in 4 months. My mom didn't say a word. She knew I was right. 2 weeks later, that store was closed. By the 3rd month, I made another big decision. We would go all in on e-commerce. Depending only on walk-in customers wasn't enough. If we wanted to grow, we needed to sell online. No one else wanted to take the risk, so I did. I used my apartment as collateral to get a loan. I sold my old engagement ring and the Rolex I had bought with my first paycheck. I emptied my savings. With that money, I hired a team to build our online store. 3 months later, paulprovisions.com went live. In the 2nd year, everything changed. One day, a famous food blogger wrote about us. She said, "I never thought a jar of jam could leave such a strong impression on me. But Paul Provisions' product did just that." Her post went viral. Sales tripled in a month. I didn't waste the moment. I started a monthly subscription service. 3 months later, we had over 290,800 subscribers. Paul Provisions was no longer just a small store. It had become a real brand. 3 years later, I had taken the company to a completely new level. Our revenue had gone up by 410%. Our products were now sold in over 300 stores across the country. We had more than 300,000 loyal customers. I used to believe this would be the moment my parents were the proudest of me. But even after all that I had done, they still saw me as just keeping the seat warm for Kevin. Now, I sat in my office, looking out at the streets of Providence. The crisp October air made me feel sharper than ever. I had worked too hard and given up too much to get here, and yet they thought I would just hand it all over. Then I looked at my phone. A new message from my mom appeared. I spoke with Kevin. He thinks it's time for a change too. You should reconsider the CEO position. I held my phone tightly. Did they really believe I would let this happen? No. I was the one who built this company. I turned a small shop in Norfolk into a national brand. My old contacts from my previous job supported me when no one else did. And still, my parents acted like I was just keeping the seat warm for Kevin. What was supposed to be a celebration had turned into a warning. I was being pushed out of the company I had saved. Later, as I rode home in the back of a limo, I watched the city lights flash past the window. A plan started forming in my mind. I used to think that if I worked hard enough, gave enough, my parents would finally see my worth. But I was wrong. If they gave the company to Kevin, all of my work would be lost. I couldn't let that happen. I wouldn't let their foolish decision destroy what I had built. For the past 2 years, I had learned everything about the business. Every part of it. And now I would use that knowledge to save the company again. But more than that, I would save myself from the disaster my parents were trying to bring on me. What they were doing could ruin everything. As dinner came to an end, Scott Miller, the lead partner at Wellington, raised his glass for a toast. "Emma, you've turned a small shop into a national brand. Without you, Paul Provisions wouldn't be here today. I look forward to a strong and successful partnership between you and our firm." I smiled and was just about to speak when my mother suddenly cut in. "Scott," she said, "my son Kevin will be taking over as CEO when he returns next month. This is the perfect time to make the change. Someone with a stronger background in management can take the company even further." The room went quiet. It felt like time had stopped. Did I hear that right? I turned sharply to look at her, but she sat calmly, like what she said was completely normal. "Excuse me, Mrs. Paul," Scott said. His voice was lower now. The energy was gone. "What exactly do you mean?" My mother gave a confident smile. "Emma has done a wonderful job, but Kevin has an MBA from Massachusetts Institute and a bigger vision. Emma laid a strong foundation, but to grow the company even more, Kevin is the better choice." A foundation? I had spent 3 years building this company from the ground up. I gave up my youth, my money, my sleep, my whole personal life. And in her eyes, I was just something Kevin could step over. I looked at Scott and his team. They were exchanging glances, clearly unhappy. "Mrs. Paul," Scott said firmly, "our investment isn't in the Paul family. Our investment is in Emma. We believe in her vision and the plans she's carried out so well over the years." My mother looked surprised but quickly covered it with a polite smile. Of course. Emma will still handle the daily work, she said casually. But the company will grow faster with someone who has a broader vision. Putting Kevin in charge is the best move for the future. I clenched my fists under the table. I felt cold anger rising inside me. They didn't see me as the person who brought this company back to life. Scott turned to me and asked, Emma, what are your thoughts on this? This was the most important moment of my life. I could explode, let the room fall apart. Or I could stay calm and take control. I chose the second. I set my wine glass down and slowly looked up, locking eyes with my mother. It seems like this is a decision I wasn't told about, I said, keeping my voice calm. Strange, considering I'm the one who worked non-stop to bring this company to where it is today. My mother opened her mouth to speak, but I didn't let her. I see, I said, nodding slowly, like something had just become clear to me. Everything I've done, every late night, every risk, was just to make things easy for Kevin to walk in and take over. That's the truth, isn't it, Mom? Her face turned cold. Don't say that. I only want what's best for the company. When a business grows, it needs stronger leadership. I let out a short, bitter laugh.
No.
You want what's best for Kevin. You've never really valued me. You've never believed your daughter could lead this company. That was the start of my pushback. I turned to Scott. I think we need to have a private meeting on Sunday. He got the message right away. Of course, he said. I stood up. Thank you all for coming. My dinner is over. I turned and walked out. My father called after me, but I didn't stop. Everything was clear now. They never meant for me to keep this company long-term. But they made one big mistake. They underestimated me. I'm not someone who gives up what I've built. If they thought I would step aside quietly, they were wrong. As I stepped out of the restaurant, I took out my phone and called Brenda, our head of marketing. We need an emergency meeting, I said. My voice was sharp. What's going on? She asked, worried. I took a deep breath. My family is trying to replace me, and I'm not going to let that happen. I had never believed that someone could just steal success. If anyone wanted to take what I built, they'd have to fight for it. And I'd make sure they lost. Friday, 7 a.m. I was already at the office. Paul Provisions' headquarters was silent. No one else had arrived yet. Just me, the numbers, and a plan. On the table in front of me were 3 folders. The first was a plan to defend my role as CEO, to show clearly that I was the only one truly fit to lead this company. The second was a backup. If they forced me out, I would leave, but I wouldn't go alone. I'd take my best team, my trusted suppliers, and my loyal customers with me. I'd start something new. I stared at the folders, feeling the cold morning air in the empty office. No matter which path they chose, I wasn't going to lose. At 9:15 a.m., the secret meeting with the investors began. Scott Miller and his team arrived right on time. I didn't wait for them to sit down. I got straight to the point. I know exactly what my family is trying to do, I said firmly. They want to replace me with my brother, Kevin. Christine Taylor, one of the key investors, adjusted her glasses. Her face was serious. We noticed the tension at dinner, she said. But the real question is, who is better for the company? I looked around the room, then placed a thick folder in front of them. I built this company, I said, my voice steady. I opened the folder and flipped through the pages. It showed everything I had done, clear proof. Since I took over, revenue had grown by 370%. Our products were in more than 300 stores across the country. We had over 210,000 loyal customers. I had made the hard decisions, closing failing stores, launching our online shop, and building partnerships with major retailers. Then I slid a blank sheet of paper across the table. This, I said, is a list of Kevin's contributions to the company over the last 6 years. Silence filled the room. Christine raised an eyebrow. A blank page. I gave a cold smile. Exactly. If you support me, I continued, I'll keep growing this company. If Kevin takes over, that stops. I turned to the next document, results from a customer survey I had collected over the last 3 years. I asked our customers one simple question: why do you choose Paul Provisions? Christine flipped through the pages, her eyes brightening as she read. 80% said they were drawn to the brand story, a young woman who took a risk to rebuild a family business. 30% said they trusted the product quality, which I personally worked on every day. Only 9% even knew the name Paul before I turned it into something people recognize. I looked straight at Scott. No one cares about the Paul name. They care about what I've built. It's my work that gives this brand its value. Scott sat quietly for a few seconds, then nodded. I have one question for you, Emma, he said, his hands folded. What if your family refuses to change their minds and still puts Kevin in charge? I slid another folder across the table. This, I said, is the plan for a new brand. Christine opened the file. Her eyes widened as she read through it. The details were clear. 90% of our suppliers had already said they would follow me. I had spoken to all the key employees. They were ready to come with me. A full marketing plan was ready. The creator of Paul Provisions now brings you something even better. Scott looked at me, then smiled. You've been planning this for a long time, haven't you? I shrugged. I had planned to use this plan for the family's next big expansion. But now it would be mine. After an hour of discussion, Scott placed his hands on the table. We're with you, Emma. I kept my face calm, but inside, the anger had faded. Now, I felt only one thing: certainty. What if my family still tries to push me out? I asked. Scott tilted his head slightly and gave a cold smile. Then the entire investment leaves with you. I took a deep breath. With the biggest investor on my side, the rest of the shareholders would have no choice but to follow. That Friday night, I sat alone in my office. Outside, the city was dark. I held a glass of red wine and looked at the lights shining through the window. If my parents made the wrong choice, they would regret it. I was ready for whatever came next. Sunday, 9:45 a.m. I walked into Paul Provisions headquarters like I did every morning. But this day was different. Brenda, Jack, and Catherine, my top managers, were already there. They hadn't needed a call or reminder. They knew what today meant. I looked at them, and for a moment, I felt something warm. In the middle of all the chaos, they were here for me. Not for the Paul name, for what I had built. Jack looked at me, steady and calm. Emma, are you ready? I nodded. More than ever. 9:10 a.m. The glass door opened. My parents walked in. My mother wore a sharp business dress, her makeup perfect, but I could see the worry in her eyes. My father looked tired, like he hadn't slept all night. Then Kevin walked in, wearing a new suit and a smug smile, like he already thought he'd won. I watched them, but said nothing. I walked to the conference table, opened my laptop, and turned on the projector. I wasn't here to beg. I was here to make my position clear. 9:30 a.m. The meeting began. Scott Miller and his team entered the room, and everything shifted. The energy changed. My mother stood up quickly and gave a polite smile. Scott, thank you for coming. We have many things to go over today. But Scott cut her off. His voice was firm, and he looked around the room before stopping on me. Then he turned back to my mother. We've all heard about your plan to change leadership. For a moment, my mother's smile slipped. I believe Kevin will bring a fresh direction to the company, my mother said. Scott leaned back in his chair, fingers locked together. Maybe you've forgotten the most important point, he said. He placed a folder on the table. We invested in Emma, not the Paul name. The room went silent. Kevin's eyebrows pulled together, and for the first time, his confident smile faded. I have an MBA from Massachusetts Institute. I've worked with big companies, he began. I have. What do you have? I cut in, my voice calm but cold. I clicked to the next slide on the screen. Total hours Kevin has worked at this company in the past 7 years. 27. Number of strategy meetings attended. 0. Deals closed. 0. Actual work experience. None. Real-world corporate results. None. Time spent traveling instead of working. Years. I looked him straight in the eye. If you think an MBA and a few trips around Europe make you a CEO, you're wrong. My mother still wouldn't back down. Emma, I'm not saying you haven't done a great job, but with Kevin's experience, he can take the company further. Based on what? I asked, narrowing my eyes. Your personal bias? My father sighed and ran a hand over his face. He knew this was a mistake, but my mother wasn't ready to admit it. Then Scott leaned forward, his voice slow and steady, but firm. We can't keep our investment in a company that replaces its CEO with someone who's done nothing. If Emma leaves, we leave too. My mother froze. You can't do that, she said. Scott gave a slight smile. I'm just stating the facts. I looked around the room and spoke clearly. You have two options. Option 1. I stay as CEO and continue leading the company like I have for the past 3 years. I turned to Kevin. You can work under me as Vice President of Business Development. That way, you can actually learn how a business runs. Kevin clenched his fists, but didn't say anything. I went on. Option 2. I walk away. I take my team, our suppliers, and our customers with me. I looked directly at my mother. And if that happens, this company will fall apart. She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came. There was nothing left to say. My father looked at me for a long time, then gave a quiet nod. You're right, he said. He picked up a pen and signed the agreement. My mother hesitated. She gripped the pen tightly. But in the end, she signed too. I kept my face calm, but inside I knew. This was the moment. I had finally secured everything that truly belonged to me. The meeting ended. Brenda was waiting outside, her eyes full of hope. Did we do it? She asked. I gave her a small smile. We won. Paul Provisions still existed, but from this day on it was mine, not my family's. 3 months later, I used to think that winning that boardroom battle would make me feel proud. I thought that when I signed the papers confirming me as CEO, I'd feel relieved. I believed that moment would finally give me the recognition I had wanted for so long. But the truth felt different. Winning didn't bring complete happiness. It just proved what I had always known deep down: I never needed their approval. The company continued to grow under my leadership. Paul Provisions didn't just survive. It did better than ever. Revenue grew by 60% in 3 months, far above what we had expected. Our subscription service passed 355,000 loyal customers. Our products were now sold in more than 480 stores across the country. Most important of all, I proved that Paul Provisions' success wasn't about the Paul name. It was about what I had built with my team. The family dynamic changed. Everything became professional. I stopped going to family dinners. There were no more calls from my mother pretending everything was fine. I gave up trying to keep the image of a happy, united family. We only spoke when we had to, and only about business. My father accepted the new reality. He didn't try to share power with Kevin anymore. In meetings, he was quiet. He no longer gave advice I didn't ask for like he used to when he thought he still had control. My mother was different. She couldn't hide how upset she was. Every time she saw me leading the company, I saw it in her eyes. She still believed Kevin deserved the role more than I did. Even now, she was waiting for me to fail, waiting for me to slip up so Kevin could take over. But that day would never come. As for Kevin, he didn't hide his anger. Being forced into the vice president role only made him hate me more. He kept trying to prove himself. But he couldn't keep up. He never would. For 3 months, he had pitched one brilliant idea after another, but none of them worked in the real world. Every time he shared a rushed, untested plan in a meeting, all it ever took was one question to throw Kevin off. Kevin, do you have any data to prove this will work? He never had a real answer. Sometimes he gave empty numbers, other times he just stayed quiet. Slowly, people stopped listening to him. He was pushed to the side. He hated me for that. But what he hated even more was the truth. He knew I was right. He knew I was better. One evening, I stood by the glass wall in my office, looking out at the lights of Providence. The city looked peaceful. Brenda walked in holding 2 cups of coffee. She sat down across from me, watched me for a second, and then asked, "Are you satisfied?" I gave a small laugh. "With what?" She shrugged. "With everything. With showing everyone you're the one who truly deserves to lead this company." I looked out the window again and thought for a moment. I don't need to prove that anymore, I said softly but firmly. For years, I had worked so hard to be seen, to be accepted by my parents, the very people who should have believed in me from the start. But now I knew the truth. I didn't need their approval. My worth didn't come from being CEO. It didn't come from my family's praise. It came from what I built with my own hands and from the people who believed in me all along. Brenda smiled and raised her coffee cup. To your victory. I clinked my cup against hers, but in my heart, I didn't call this a victory. This was freedom. I hadn't just taken back my company, I had taken back my life. The story of Emma isn't just about business. It's about finding self-worth. It's about how family pressure, favoritism, and old expectations can make someone feel invisible, even when they're doing all the work. Emma's story reminds us that real value doesn't come from status or from people's approval. It comes from what we create with our own effort. Success isn't handed to you, you have to fight for it. And sometimes, the greatest freedom comes when you stop trying to please people who never saw your worth in the first place. What about you? Have you ever worked hard and still been overlooked? Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more real stories about family, success, and self-worth.